Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode number 4 of our Awesome African series. And today we're talking with Caleb Tshavalala. He's working on the edge as a venture and product designer to create new businesses in Africa. Listen to his views on the importance of being a good observer, creative problem solving, lifelong learning, discovering your purpose, and ethical design. Hi, everybody. This is Zahara, and today we have Caleb Tshavalala with us. So, Caleb, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and what it is you actually do?
Okay, cool. That's going to be the rest of this.
Yeah,
uh,
hard
so,
to define.
yeah, I call myself a product designer. It's because it's the closest term I can find to what I'm doing now. And it's literally just a tag for people looking for people like me to find me on the internet, on LinkedIn. Um, what I do now is um, basically just like helping people think through uh, problems uh, and then solutions and how to apply those solutions, kind of putting the person at the center. The way that I'm doing it now is more business facing, which means I work with startups and I work internally at Founders Factory Africa to um, build new ventures from looking at market trends and those kind of things. So I'm basically a designer who's kind of like taken a step back and is involved in the very, very initial kind of like process of like building businesses rather than kind of like coming in where there's like a big corporation or a big company that's already operating. So I'm kind of like in that very early kind of stage before businesses kind of like scale or like literally from scratch, from idea, from like a pitch deck or um, nothing at all, or
Yeah, so
a
our
piece
work
of
is
number.
pretty,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's a very unconventional kind of job to do right now. So how did you end up doing what you're doing right now?
Oh, I would like to take all the credit by chance. so, so I don't have a strong academic background. I studied design initially. I really, really like after high school. I was really, really passionate about animation, cartoons. That's what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that at the time, so I enrolled at a college for graphic design, art and design, I think it was called. Did that. At the end of it, I just felt like the time was too short. I needed to kind of like expand a little bit. I think I went and studied multimedia at UNISA while I was working at the same time. It was really difficult. I needed to quit the one. Uh, I worked as an illustrator for a little while. I think around 2007, maybe. Yeah, I think that was the time. I worked as an illustrator, did some illustrations and some design work. Then I think in 2010 it was, I went and enrolled for design, no, for animation. So 2D traditional animation, like with a light table and just sit there, draw frame by frame. That was really excruciating, to be honest. Uh, I spent 2 years doing it, and it was really fulfilling to kind of understand the process and how it works. And there's a lot of learnings that I took that I still apply in my career today. But I didn't actually see myself as a practicing animator, as like waking up every day and going to do that, which is an interesting thing to chat about because that's the thing, right? I think if you look at how how we kind of engage with each other when it comes to career paths very early on, like in high school. I think the way that the question is asked is very fun. Like, again, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which is kind of a branding exercise. I don't want to be anything, right? Like, but maybe that's not the right way to ask the question. It's like, what are you passionate about? Like, what world do you want to live in? What kind of problems do you want to solve, right? And I think that that's a much better question to ask because you kind of like understand the raw passion of that specific person and not necessarily what they see themselves as, which is more
Yeah.
of a branding excellence. Like most of us would like, I want to be an engineer. Like I want to be a chemical engineer. What does a chemical engineer? I have no idea.
That's true, right? And I mean, these roles are changing all the time. So if you could be saying you want to be something now, in 20 years' time, when you actually grow up, those roles probably are not going to be there, and then you don't know what to do with yourself.
Yeah. So I think what happened, I think in my case also is in retrospect, I can see what kind of happened, but it was never planned. Um, but it's a collection of skills and learnings that you need to pick up along the way and adapt for you to be able to be involved in solving a specific problem. So if you look at the problem that we're solving right now is, democratizing design, information, and education, and kind of, making sure that everyone across the continent has that strong foundation of building products in a user-centered kind of way. But if you had asked me 5 years ago, like, how do you set yourself up to be that person that kind of solves that problem, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So it's as if like all the time I need to kind of look around and go like, what are the skills that I need to pick up for me to be able to kind of like solve this problem? The other reason I'm saying this is if we think about how much the world is changing, right? It's got like this telescoping nature. Like every time it just changes like faster and faster and faster and faster, which means you need to adopt faster and faster and faster, which means continuous or lifelong learning, right? I think the thing that made school bearable was probably because I knew there was an end to it. I knew I was going to finish it, like I was going to qualify. The thing that makes lifelong learning a bit scary for me is if you find yourself in something that you're not passionate about, you're going to have a problem. Because I think the biggest motivator for someone to learn and absorb information is if they're really, really passionate about that subject. So it's no longer very kind of feasible to decouple the two, to go like, this is my work and this is me, because it's going to be difficult for you to keep learning something that you really don't care about, that you see as a career, right? You almost want to couple the two, and you'll have almost like an automatic inclination towards kind of like learning like new skills. Yeah.
So what is it that you are passionate about? What problems are you passionate about solving?
I'm passionate about solving problems in the continent, and I'm still in the process of kind of like refining that. I think it's okay not to know. And it's okay to know a little and then learn and know a lot. There were certain things that I honed in on when I was a child. Things like poverty, I just like really hated. I think it can be solved. I think creating opportunity for other people that like didn't exist before, like helping communities kind of like find information that they wouldn't be able to find, this kind of transition from moving. I think South Africa has like this great gap between the have and the have nots. And I've always looked at that and go, this is crap, it shouldn't be like this, right? We need to move the people to the other side. And the strategies went from like, I would take application forms and give to kids and go like, yeah, you need to apply and go to university. That was very small scale. And now it's literally at this level where we're going, let's help Africa create new businesses for itself so that it can create employment, so that it can kind of like bridge that gap. Let's have African founders and African entrepreneurs. Let's go into these communities and enable people. And that is it's just a much larger scale, right? And it's not something that I set out to do. It just kind of like was the thing that was immediately around me. Like, I really hate this and I want to change it. And then over time, kind of as it evolved, right? Initially, it became like a kind of selfish game where like I was just like looking at myself and advancing my career. And I got to a point where like, I was really unhappy. I think a few years ago, I actually just sat and did nothing. I just couldn't take it anymore. I just felt like the work that I was doing was not meaningful. I wasn't getting that fulfillment. It was not aligned to the problem that I was trying to solve. But with this new skill sets and this new access that I have and this new network of people and this knowledge that I have now, how do I reposition myself again, to kind of like solve that problem? And I think that's what happened. And I saw this as an opportunity to go, okay, I can take the skills and help these people that are doing this, which is the same problem that I'm trying to solve, but we're solving it on a bigger scale.
So for people in the same situation who are, in their jobs and they're like frustrated that it's not fulfilling and they don't know what to do next, they don't know how to shift out of that mindset or go to another industry or start a new career, what advice would you give them? How can they, take that that discomfort? How can they take that discomfort that they feel and do something with it?
Oh, that's easy. They can just call me.
So you do career counseling now.
Like I am looking for pro bono everywhere. No, I think one has to be really realistic about this. I had someone, I think, from the University of Victoria who's just about to graduate, and they were explaining to me that they're looking to start a career in design, but they don't know where to start, right? And this is what they're passionate about, and I shared what I did, and it's really fascinating, and I love it, but the thing that I always say is just like kind of be realistic, right? So you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're giving up your career to do this thing and it's not feasible, right? You've got a family to feed, or you come from a very difficult background where like they kind of like depend on you. You need to kind of like look around and start small, right? Look at initiatives that you can do. I think it's very sad to see how much time people have like creating dribble shots and like these useless things that they just like post on my timeline, where they could just like take that time and do something like really meaningful. If that is what meaningful means to you, right? I'm not prescribing in any kind of way, but I think, yeah, just kind of utilizing your time to look at like things that you can do meaningfully around you, and you start there, right? And what happens is like you'll find other people that are really interested. You'll build a network of people that are really interested. Like I've had an interesting conversation with someone on LinkedIn who literally just like saw something that I wrote and they went, "Oh, I'm really passionate about. Do you want to chat? Yeah, I'm doing this. Are you on?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm on board. Let's do it." But you just literally need to get out there and kind of do it so that you can discover the people that are doing it, right? And you kind of like build that network. I don't think there's a formula for it, but the one thing that I would caution against is, and sometimes you need that kind of credibility and experience and building a network and trust so that when you send an email, it's easier, right? Like, if I sent an email to you and asked you for something, it would be easier than like someone that you literally don't know. So, I don't think anyone can like shortcut the path to getting there. I think there's a little bit of like groundwork that you need to do and then you slowly transition. I wouldn't advise someone to be like me and just like quit and sit and do nothing.
But sometimes you do. I mean, that's the time when you really have to introspect and think about what's important to you and whether you want to carry on this path that you're on or make a change, which are the things. So it's always about what can you live with? Can you live with staying on that path? Or,
I agree. I'm speaking in the context of feasibility. If that is something that you can do feasibly and it's not gonna like really damage your life in any kind of way, I would say do it. But I'd also put a caveat there and say, you need to be in a position kind of going as well as I thought it would. Like my thoughts are kind of like fragmented, but yeah.
Yeah. So another thing you mentioned, right, was initially you started off by giving applications to people going to university, and now you're working with starting, businesses or startups in Africa. So, I think we grew up with the idea that if you go to university, you're going to get out of poverty, you're going to be successful. What has your views been around that academic success?
Well, I don't know. It doesn't have. It's not guaranteed, right? We can't go let's train people to do work while we're not creating work. So that's why I'm on the other side going like, if I'm telling people to, to go and study so that they can work, let me contribute into helping create work. So if a startup like, spins out and, raises money and becomes a big company, then I've essentially created like 400,000 jobs. And then, I can safely go out and go like, you guys need to study because there's a lot of work. I think I'm going to answer it as simple as that. I think that's where that like we kind of like need to balance it out, or what's going to happen is just like this demand and supply craze of like you had IT coming in and everyone became an IT specialist and now there's no work. Yeah. And then there was the business analyst thing, and like that went on for a while. Now there's the UX thing. I don't know how long.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a wave, like, oh yeah, this is a lucrative career, go and do this, go study this. And then by the time you finish, like 5 years later, okay, it's not the in thing anymore. You've got to adapt to something else.
Speaking of which, that's a very interesting topic. Like, kind of people have been asking me the same questions, like, for a while now. And I think I'm going to try and answer this. I've always been trying to avoid the question. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you prepare for like a future career, right? Given the fact that like you are in this education system, there's nothing really that you can do about it. But is there anything that you could do outside of like that education system to kind of prepare yourself? And my view is this, right? Let's look at things like technology, right? So if you look, I think you should never compete with technology. I don't think it's a good idea. So there's things that technology is really good at doing, and it's better than humans at doing it. And there's like things that just is really difficult to replace the human kind of element of it. And I think competing with technology means, for me, literally means if you're gonna do something that a computer is better at doing, then you're probably looking at a career that's gonna hit some sort of slump soon.
Yeah.
And so the way I see it is there's a few roles right now. There's a role that is like competing directly with technology, but because the technology is not there yet, you're still there. And then there's like the role where you're helping the technology get there, which is you and me. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we're going to replace ourselves.
Right? And then you kind of paint yourself into this corner, right? But I think there's a silver lining to that, right? I think with anything that we create, a solution that we create, with it comes a whole new set of problems. And that becomes the new roles, right? Technology is going to break, things will need to be built. And what does that kind of look like? And this is how I think about it. Like I go, all right, if we were to structure this narrative, would go, we want a future to look like this, but who decides? Who's deciding that? Because if we knew what the future is going to look like, then we could predict that if they're building that, then they're going to need people to maintain that or to fix that when it breaks. And this is a question that I've been asking myself for a long time, which becomes really interesting. I just watched Space Odyssey 2001, the Stanley Kubrick classic, and the movie got released 1968, and then you think about how long it took to make it. So it was like a little earlier than that. So cool. That means those tablets that are there, like we've got iPads now, like iPads are really not that old. And then I looked at HAL 9000, like the computer on there, and it's very, very similar to my Alexa or my HomePod or whatever that thing is called, right? There's like a resemblance. We've been wanting this. So I'm asking myself, who's the visionary? Is it the technology people that build technology, or is it some people that come up with a vision and then technology just plays catch up? If I give you another reference to a movie, that's Schwarzenegger, Total Recall. If you look at like the ATMs and the screen at the top, you go to F&B right now, it looks like that. So I'm like, is there a pattern here? Do we actually like, is the collective consciousness bought in on this like visionary idea of what the future is going to look like, and we just like try and build towards that future? Because if that's the case, then it would be easy to predict what it's going to look like, right?
Yeah.
The things that we, yeah, go for it.
So for me, it's like, everybody's just exactly what you mentioned, the collective consciousness, right? We all have to be consciously envisioning this future that we want, or we're just going to end up going along with whatever somebody else imagined.
Yeah. What I predict is because most technology is built around the pursuit of efficiency, which is being pushed by who.
Yeah.
We kind of not very purposeful about the way that we're not very considerate about like any sort of impact that it has, except like the immediate impact. And I think that the question of ethics will keep staring you in the face, right? And I think the way that we're building things right now so rapidly without thinking about them, we will need to go back and fix it. You know how like we do stuff and then we go back and fix it, global warming.
But this is the thing, right? You can't always fix it. And some of these are like permanent problems and damage, cause a lot of damage. And we are, you're right, we're building things so fast now and you're focusing only on the technology without thinking of the long-term impacts. We can't really go back and undo that. So we need to take the time now to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a guy working at a food delivery business now that has like a little app where you can order pizza and it delivers it actually thinks when he's sitting in front of like his design software. I don't think they actually think about, there used to be 1,000 cars on the road in this specific suburb. Now we're going to have bikes zapping around every 2 minutes. That is more carbon emission. I don't think that's how we think, right? I don't think we are that kind of deliberate in the impact that we're making. And that's a bit of a problem, right? I think I read somewhere where someone was complaining about how Airbnb has impacted their lives unintentionally. I'm like, how does that even work? Like, oh, I don't have neighbors anymore. I've got people with their bags coming in at like 4 a.m. in the morning, and like, my kids don't have neighbors anymore. And I'm like, that's a valid problem, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think something like that is an actual problem. And I think when we start having more of them and they build up, then you have this thing that's almost broken, and then we kind of like go back and fix it. I literally see it like that, right? And I think positioning yourself in that space becomes really interesting. To think about what would these things look like and what would fixing it look like, right? I think that's where my mind is at, to go, what are the collective things that I need to learn as a human being to kind of position myself to understanding this. I mean, GDPR and POPI Act just followed after. A couple of things probably went wrong before they got implemented. You know what I mean? And if you think about it, law has a very different role to play now. If you look at like coming up with those acts and those regulations, and it's a different way of looking at like how legal would kind of like operate in the future. Saying, I think that the interesting thing about any conversation, and the reason I love the conversation that I'm having right now, is we've always been boxed into this like academic way of thinking, where you need to define an academic rubric for what you're saying, and you need to validate it with facts. It's not like I'm just thinking these things are and just like speaking about them. Like, you have to have these facts and have to be really credible. And I think some things happen out of like just serendipity, right?
Yeah.
And some things happen out of iteration. I mean, my collective experience as someone who works in tech where they work right now, after having done this and failed and tried that and failed and tried this and failed, that collective experience and someone else's experience could be something that we chat about and refine into a process of getting somewhere. Process becomes really interesting when things change really quickly because it almost has to be a work in progress concurrently.
Yeah.
I have this process. It's kind of working, but it's not there. And when I want to get there, the thing that I'm doing has also changed on the other side.
Yeah, I've been there. I know. I think we also talked about this before. Like, we're figuring how to do it, how to build this process while we're actually building, these new things, because it has
while
been
it's
new.
changing.
Yeah.
While it's changing, that's like if that variable wasn't there, if we're figuring out how to do it while it was constant, it would be great.
Yeah.
So you figure out how to do it, and then literally when you go like, I've done it, it's changing as well.
That's the nature of things now. Everything's changing. While you're creating new things, it's changing into something else, and you just got to roll with it. And this is another thing about, we always talk about data-driven design and data-driven decisions and all of that. But a lot of the time when you're talking about innovation, there's no data to support anything because it's new stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to go on intuition,
Definitely. I think the one thing that I got from animation that I always share with everyone is this notion of learning through observation, right? So there's books, you could go to school, you could take an online course, but the interesting thing about animation that I think a lot of people don't think about is when you're sitting there and you're watching, if a leaf falls from a tree, no more, like it's not like when you go and shoot and like there's a camera and there happen to be a tree in the background. You have to actually really observe how trees move, how leaves fall from a tree, how dust so you need to set up that environment, and it forces you to have like this very heightened sense of concentration to go and observe and learn things. And I think that really becomes important when you kind of like observing people, which seems like it's going to be the biggest study right now, because if tech is going to do everything, like the thing that matters is in the center is the human, right? It's the people that we're designing for, or the people that we're trying to service. And I think that's a very important thing that gets left behind when we want to define like an academic group for everything, to go like, yeah, but where did you learn that? I just saw it.
Yeah.
I just sat there for hours and I looked at it and I observed and I saw that's the nature of it. I know that the gravity probably plays a role in that, and you could define it like scientifically, but all I'm saying is I sat there and I just like looked at it, and I think it's really important, especially when you kind of, so if you look at the field that we're in, there's a lot of debating that happens because some things are not exactly a science, right?
Yeah.
And just because something is not a science doesn't mean it isn't real, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's something to revisit, because humans are very loose. They're unpredictable.
We create these personas as if, like they're going to behave exactly like how we say they're going to behave, and this is exactly what they're going to want. But people change all the time, they're not a static thing, and you have to have that keen sense of observation to see really what is going on, all the time.
Yeah, the interesting thing that I've learned, like with those things, is a process can work while it's still broken. And so the biggest difference between what I'm doing now and when I used to work for big companies is, in big companies, you already have a lot of customers. So if you build a product, you create a persona and you do this thing, when you launch it, you surface it to like 4 million people. I mean, a few of them are going to buy it, right? and then you go, damn, those personas were so good, but you block my app every time like I opened my app. There was a screen there selling this thing to me. I had to eventually kind of like open it, right? And it's so easy to kind of go, that process worked because we ended up with 1 million customers. I think the interesting part is when you find a person going about their lives and you're introducing a new product and a new brand that is not attached to anything, and you want to interrupt their lives, the way that they used to do things, you want to introduce this new thing. Then it becomes a whole different story, right? Then your process really needs to work. You'll realize that your personas don't work. You'll realize that the process that you're following didn't really work, right? You realize that you don't even have a single customer that you're advertising to. So, you could grow a really big head with dropping successful products for years and you've been doing it incorrectly. And I think it's been a very humbling experience to kind of go back and go like, do I understand these people? And I realized, no, I don't. Because you can't put them into a little box.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand how comfortable people are in you interrupting the way they go about their lives, because it's a routine. You need to find the optimal point to interrupt them. So if they used to go and buy food, with their car, and you want to introduce this online service, like when do you actually interrupt that process and go like, oh, there's this new thing, that you surface it, and then they'll be willing to adapt it. It's a very, very insane experience. And I think that's why the startup world is so hard, is because you've got like these limited resources and you are trying to do that at a very large scale, and you just realize that people are really weird. And I think we need to kind of like bring that back, right? Just kind of try and learn and try and empathize with them, and iterate. That's a very interesting term, actually, iteration. I wonder if we shouldn't bring that to like something like the education system, right? I think, the process of iteration, like I said this to you before in another conversation, to go like, sometimes when you're having a conversation and people ask you questions, it's as if like you need to go and prepare this very definitive answer, and it's going to solve the problem, right? So if something is not working, sometimes it's kind of fixed through experimentation and not necessarily a definitive answer. And what I mean by this is, have people actually tried other methods and then they fail, and then you try another one, and then you kind of like iterate on it and go, oh, this is like the perfect process, right? The same way I've been living my life, learning this, moving here, moving there, to try and get to this path that I wanted to be. Then amazing results actually happen, right? You can't have, I think also kind of having a small sample size and then creating something and going like and putting your stamp on it, then dropping it, is kind of dangerous as well.
How do you mean?
I mean, if we went, the way that we're teaching our kids now is not right for the future, and we found this like kind of magic process that's going to prepare them for the future, and we kind of land it on everyone and it's wrong, I think that's really dangerous, right?
Yeah. I don't think there is a magic process. It's like, like you said, like you're building something new. You're learning while doing this process.
Yeah, I think that way of thinking needs to be adopted by a lot of industries. I think it needs to be adopted by the way we teach our kids. I mean, I have a boy, he's a year and a half old, and he can count. I have proof. And that happened by accident. I thought kids started talking at like 2, and then counting is like something that they do later on, in their lives. And that was not purposeful. That was not intended. It was literally just by accident, because we are on lockdown and it's COVID-19, and we just want to try and keep him busy while we work. So we switched on this show on YouTube, and it just kept playing on repeat, and boom. So maybe they learn better by just watching stuff and it repeats. Maybe it's the animation that I'm not really sure. I can't really have this kind of conversation with him, but there's something really interesting there, right? Why is the way that we learn things not changing? Right.
Yeah, I think it's time we change, because our education system was built so long ago for a different outcome, and it no longer serves us. I mean, the kind of future we're looking at and all the changes that are happening now, the way we've been learning in the past, or when we were in school, is not serving us in the rate of change that is happening right now.
Yeah, I think my 3D animation class was probably like the most interesting class I was in. When I first like took my work and put it online, people like started critiquing it and whatnot, and like you build this community of people. I started knowing like people from all over the world, and they'll give you advice on how to use this and how to do that, and that was like really, really interesting. And I think I got a small little project I think it was a lighting project, it's like an effects kind of project. It was like a mall visualization or something like that. And the guy that gave it to me, I was like, I don't know how to do that, right? I'm just a student. And he went like, you don't give answers like that in this industry. What you do is you say, I will get it to you by Saturday morning, and then you spend the whole of Friday learning how to do it. And I remember staying up all night, like just like watching videos and like just learning how to do this thing. And I did it. It was so crappy, but the client was not really like kind of an aesthetic person, so they didn't actually even notice how crappy it was. But that was it. I did it. I landed the project, and I realized that if this is the one thing that I needed to do for that, imagine all the other things that I will have to do that people assume I know, and like by year whatever, you've forgotten all the stuff that you've learned. You need to kind of go back and learn it again. I think that was a moment of epiphany for me where I went, you can never really learn enough. I think the most important thing to learn is how to learn and learn very quickly and adapt, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's how I've been writing right now. Because if you think of the role that I play, I work with startups from different industries. So I don't really know before they come in, like I might have never worked in that industry before, and I need to play catch up quickly, even though some of the principles and the core of what I do will remain the same, the application is different. And I think that's the interesting part. Like, how do you take this thing that you've learned and couple it with something else? What I'm starting to see is also, I don't know if you've noticed, the roles that are put up on the internet, say you're looking for a new job.
Yeah.
I have never seen one where I really qualify, like, right? Even the ones that I've gotten, like, I look at it and go like, I can't do all of this.
What I've noticed is like they're just combining everything they can find into one role. Like you have to be a full stack designer, full stack developer, and you have to have like 10 years experience in something that was only developed 2 years ago. So I don't even know what, people are doing in HR anymore.
But here's the interesting part. When I walk in the door the first day, you can't expect me to kind of do all those things in one day, right? Or in the first month, some of them in the first year, you never get to use any of those skills, right? It's not so much an expectation, actually. It's you just can't, right? It's not what you're going to ask from the person, but like upfront, that's what you're looking for. But once you get into the role, you're like, but I haven't developed anything. It's been 6 months, right? And I think what's happening is it's no longer like the roles. I think it's the people, right? I think the roles have to look at someone who can bring value and kind of just like bring them in, and then think about how you can best utilize this person. In other instances, it's not about like how much of that stuff you know. It's like who can move from wherever they are and adapt the quickest to what we need right now, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen that is the truth about it, right? You go, if you were to look for someone who's been working at a bank as a designer for 15 years versus someone who's worked for 19 startups in the past, whatever, like if you wanted to do a role like me, it would make sense to take someone with 19 startups, right? Because they've got like all that exposure and they're used to change. So you're looking at the attributes that this person has versus what you're looking for and how they're going to fit into that role. I know that is not the way that hiring works right now.
But it should. Yeah.
But it should.
Yeah. No,
and
really.
I hope we get.
Yeah, we're looking for people. We're going to need people who are adaptable, can learn very quickly, just adapt whatever skills they have from one industry to the next. So you having, 15 years experience in one thing doesn't mean you can actually take that and transfer it to something else.
Exactly. So how do you position yourself to be that person who is kind of sitting here and going, if someone was looking for someone, I'd be the person that's like the easiest adaptable to that role. Right?
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting question to ask. Maybe that's how we should be thinking about ourselves. Like, What
Yeah.
are the skills that I need to learn to kind of like be that flexible to? So the gap between what is required in me should always be very small,
Yeah.
or at least smaller than my competitors.
But this is the thing,
Yeah.
right? HR or job descriptions don't even mention those things. They're always looking for a very finite or rigid kind of, set of things that they require. But your adaptability, your ability to learn, your flexibility, all of those things is not even mentioned there. And they don't even, kind of see it. And even, we had this conversation with someone else the other day about, just reading CVs using AI. So they're not even, making that assessment of how you can adapt your current set of skills to the next situation. So a lot of these things are being lost, and we need to really look at how we hire people, I guess.
I, I guess the question for me, or the observation, I think that is the most important thing that I want to chat about is, who's taking on responsibility, right? So if you think about a career path, we need to think about it as a narrative, right? As a story of someone starting here and ending there. Transformation just can't happen in one place, and it doesn't happen on the other place, right? So, and you'll find that a lot, right? Like banks require designers because they just need them. They've got this technology now, but HR really doesn't understand that our training was never aligned for me to go ahead and interview at a bank. That's why I rocked up in flip-flops. that's you know what I mean. So like in that entire process, if we transforming it on the one end and we don't transform it on the other end, it's just not going to be compatible, which is a bit of a problem. So like, whose responsibility is it? Like, which people have to sit and have a conversation around, like, if we're changing this, then it's going to affect that, and then we need to change that, right? Because you just have this chaos happening everywhere where people are being trained, but they're not being trained for what is required, and people require stuff, and it's as if they're really oblivious to like the training that is actually happening, right? I'm sure you've got a lot of like
Yeah.
LinkedIn messages where people ask you for something that just doesn't make any sense to you, right?
What I've seen or found is that people are still, very much in their little industry or their silos, and their department or whatever. So they're only focusing on that. They don't get to see the big picture or understand the trends that are happening in other spaces that are going to shift what's happening in their space. So everybody's not on the same page. They're just like, we're so used to these structures that we created that it's hard to think outside of them.
Yeah, which is really interesting because my next point is, what happens when that hits global scale, right? Because that's the world that we're living in right now, and COVID-19 has made it very clear that anyone can work from anywhere. I don't think that was not clear before. I just think there were people that didn't get the message, and I think they get it now, right? And when those people that are really critical in the process to kind of change how things work, if we get buy-in from those people, right, then the world changes. Then training becomes a very complicated thing. Like, what do you do with diversity and culture and all these nuances that are different from like geography to geography, right? So you're adding that layer of complexity on top of like all the other complexities that we have. So the hiring process in South Africa is not compatible to the people that are looking for work. Like, at least in my industry, I don't know about other industries.
Yeah.
What happens when like the culture is also broken as well? Right? It's how do you? Because now you've got a couple of things to adapt to. You go into this role where you don't fit 100%. You're just very similar to the person they're looking for. It's a new industry, so you have to adapt your skills today. You have to upskill so that you're the person that they're looking for, and at the same time, you have to kind of adapt to this new culture, or maybe not even one culture. There's the company culture, and then you've got like people in 15 countries working together, right? So they've got like like all these layers of complexity going on, and I'm just asking myself if that's not going to cause some level of like fatigue.
Yeah.
Or
I definitely
like
agree.
some friction.
I'm actually in that position where, I work with so many different people from so many different countries, and sometimes we don't even speak the same language. We're translating while we in a meeting, each one speaks a different language, and the cultures are so different. So, going forward, it's just going to be more of that, because the world is getting so small, we're so connected, and we have to work with each other like this, across different continents. And it just has to become a new skill that becomes our norm, right? Being able to collaborate with so many different people, with so many different cultures. I mean, before, businesses used to train their staff when they were entering a new market or a new country, specifically for that country. But now there's kind of a global culture, and then there's other ways of dealing with people from different cultures and different languages and different business styles and all kinds of things. It just has to become part of our tool set, I think, in this new era.
Yeah, so which means that tool set is really expanding
Yeah.
really quickly. And
Mm.
I think I don't know, I was chatting to somewhere last year, and they were saying they work in an industry where, like, after you graduate and you start working, the knowledge base of that industry is just like quadrupling every year.
Yeah,
So like by the time you start kind of like practicing, you literally have no idea like, what's going on,
exactly. A
which
lot of
becomes really interesting.
where the industries that are changing so rapidly, especially when technology comes into there, whatever you learned in school or university no longer applies. It was like actually pointless, because you're starting from scratch. You have to go and learn a whole new thing, and it's very difficult.
Yeah, that is also very interesting for me. Like that, you know, is like will we be able to package this, right? For instance, like the tool set that is required for you to actually go and be successful in whatever you need to do with your life. Would we be able to actually package it into like a degree program, or is it a collage of bits and pieces of skills that you put together to align yourself to whatever your goal is, and that becomes really, really interesting. And I think what's really sad is this notion of responsibility.
Yeah. I
Interrupting.
think we're still figuring out all these new skills and how to adapt them and how to use them. And I'm very wary of just putting everything into a very structured setup, like how we do have university degrees, because it's constantly changing, right? So the more structured anything is, the harder it is to change and adapt and be flexible. So yeah, I think of them as Lego pieces. You kind of pick and choose what you need all the time, and rearrange them as you go along.
Yeah, I think removing accreditation out of, if we took that out of the picture, and we looked at disrupting like education the way that it is right now, that would be really interesting, right? To go, maybe we don't fix the old, right? Maybe we fix the old the same way that the other industries are doing it, just by introducing something new that works better, right? And challenges the old norms. uh, I think maybe that's a way of thinking about it. But I've always been really interested in this idea of, like, we've been talking, right? We've been engaging, we've been thinking of ideas, we've been solving problems, but it needs to land on someone's lap as a, as an
Something as a
action
product or
item.
service, yeah.
No, no, on your to-do list. Like, this is your problem, right? You need to solve it. So, like, who kind of goes out and executes like these things that we're chatting about? Whose responsibility
So
is it to see this transformation
I think it's a
happening?
collective effort. I mean, it's no one person is going to solve this problem, and as many people talking. We need as many people as possible talking about these things, collaborating, thinking about it, and taking action on it. I don't think any of the problems that we're facing now, all these wicked problems, need so many different hands working on them. And this is the problem, right? We always think there has to be a correct answer or a right solution, but it's not like that. I mean, this is not school anymore. These are big, messy problems, and the solution is always growing and changing, and
Yeah,
there's no right answer.
yeah.
It's a
I
subjective
think,
answer.
yeah, I really think that's the solution there, right? I think it's a matter of like reaching out to as many people as possible. I think the danger in a lot of like activities that I've seen that try and tackle problems is the narrow access to diversity. And I mean diversity in skills, diversity in authority, and diversity in like the different disciplines in which we exist. So a good example is a developer conference where developers are talking to each other about developer problems that are caused by product managers who are not in the room. It's always like that. It's designers talking about design problems that are caused by C-level suite who is never in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this idea of talking to each other, whether kind of. I think what's been interesting with the work that I'm doing right now is I'm speaking less and less to designers and with other people, just figuring out how they create their own problems, how they solve them as well. Like the interesting one is how they created them in the first place, but also how they actually go about solving the problems, right? How they kind of like value our way of thinking and our way of solving problems. What you think is really logical and simple is sometimes very difficult for other people. They just create complexities in their head, and they're really smart people, right? I think if there's anything that I would like anyone to take out of this conversation is the fact that when things that normally don't happen, amazing things happen. So a combination of like two people that would never like talk to each other, a combination of skills that would never like coexist, a lot of things happen, right? If I think if we're having this conversation with someone from a different industry, someone from education or something like that, they would be really, really, kind of interested in how we're thinking about it and how they're thinking about it. You know what I mean? Because we kind of like create this like mental blockers for ourselves by just existing in this one space. And I think I'd be very happy to kind of see more conversations happening that like, are at the liminal of like different industries and different ways of thinking. Yeah.
Totally agree. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're talking to people from all different industries, different walks of life. We're speaking to teachers, principals, the department, people in tech. So, we want to see different perspectives on what the future could look like, what education should look like, because education, I think, is the basis of everything in society, right? I mean, the whole point of education is to teach you how to, exist in a society. And if society is changing so much, how are we changing education to prepare people for that new society? So this is, these conversations are about opening up the space to explore new things together, because the way everything's structured is we only look at our industry, we only have conversations with people like us. We don't even know what other people are saying or thinking, and we don't get to learn from that. So this is about just opening the conversation, and that's where you're going to get the new ideas, the new visions, and just collaborating across so many different disciplines and industries and levels, I guess.
I think, I really value that. And I think, that there's value in unrefined thought, I think. Also, just having people think on the spot, like, what they're feeling. And, because I think when we introduce a lot of structure and like conversations become formal, that's really important as decisions need to be made, but at the same time, you kind of like lose that feeling. I mean, if you look at things like discussions around racism and those kind of things, they're very difficult to have just because of like the emotional nature. And if you don't want to acknowledge it, then you already broke the the discussion before it even happened, right? And there almost needs to be that kind of robust debate around, what needs to happen, why it needs to happen, the way that we're seeing it. Because I think even if you kind of ignore it, like there's these questions that like just keeps staring you in the face, right? Like, the responsibility that everyone has when you're creating this thing. Because I think what we're creating right now is just a Frankenstein of things that are benefiting us in our little corner, a startup or company or wherever you are. You're just like creating this thing, and there's no like zoomed out version to look at this thing that we're creating and what it's going to become, right? it's just a whole bunch of like a good example is I go on the app store and ask myself, like, when is it ever going to stop? Like, what is it? Like, there was a time where I used to go and look for a QR code scanner, and I went QR code scanner, and 3 of them would come up, and then I would look for the one with the highest rating. Now you go and QR code scan. I'm like, when is it ever going to stop? There's just like, if the last one wasn't successful, why did another person make another one? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And it's insane, right? And I think I really do think that there needs to be a conversation around being more purposeful, being more deliberate, being more responsible, about like the things that we're making. I think we're also at the forefront of creating technology, more especially the technology that's on the internet, what people are interacting with. We're the front line, right? We're the designers.
Yeah.
we make the visuals before they even get there. Like we design the logic of how it's going to work.
Yeah.
And I think it rests with us, right? I had a conversation with another guy, and we were just chatting about this idea of incentivizing pushback, right? And I think it's a really important skill for a designer to have. The most important person in that process of making technology to have the grit to push back is the designer, because if it goes past your your desk to someone else's desk, that thing is being built, right? You almost have to have, the guts to go and go like, no, we're not going to build it like that. That is wrong. That is not how you do things. You might not win all the time, but it's just getting into the culture that people need to understand that they don't just like sit there and take instructions, right?
Yeah.
We need to think about the ethical implications of like what we're doing and a whole lot of other things, right? And I think if we shout loud enough and long enough, people are going to start like considering it. I know that there's always this talks around like, budget and like people are motivated by business and stuff, but I think people have, reasoning, right?
You would think that, but like, sometimes I don't know.
I think it's because the implications as well are not that obvious at the stage that we're in. I think if one company got into trouble for doing this, if Facebook got into trouble for doing something, and I went to work and went like, let's not do that because Facebook did this, people would be really scared. So I think because the implications are not there, it's a very difficult conversation to have. I think it's a matter of also just kind of learning how to frame that narrative. I wrote an article, I think a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I don't remember when it was, but I was chatting around like, how do you kind of highlight the value out of something that is kind of what we need to do, but people don't want to buy into it. And the simple example is, if someone doesn't want to design for accessibility, maybe don't force them to do it as a charity kind of act. Maybe show them from a business perspective how many people would be willing to buy that product, right? Like, there's this many people that like kind of like would buy your product, but now they won't. I think we need to be well versed in the skills of like being able to position our argument in a business kind of quantifiable way, like that shows value. Like, what is the value of doing something like that, right? Ethically, or maybe a company wants to become a B Corp, right? Maybe you want to be a sustainable company or whatever the case is, or maybe it's brand perception. I think it's the positioning that's really important, right? It's not going there and going like, we shouldn't design like this because it's bad. But I think we need a lot of designers to kind of like start taking that stance to go, how do I make sure that I design responsibly, and how do I create an environment where I'm allowed to do that what is valuable to these people, and let me show them, the value that I could deliver if they allow me to design it this way. I think that could work.
I think that's a lot of responsibility on designers as well, but I don't think it's all on them. So I think the business
Yep.
business is made up of people. The business is not a thing on its own, right? It's the culture, and that culture needs to be more conscious. So we try to translate everything to bottom line, to how much money we're going to make, or how our brand looks. But at the core of it, your business has to have purposeful actions. People have to take actions that are ethical, that are conscious, that are not just about exploitation. And I think that's a big word that we use for everything in business: exploit the market, exploit the people, exploit whatever resources. It's all about exploiting.
I think the way that I'm thinking about it is from a very kind of design stance, because that's what I do. But in general, I think everyone has to be a gatekeeper for whatever they're doing, right? So they need to go like, what is it that I can do to make sure that like the work or whatever that goes past me, is of, acceptable standards, or acceptable kind of like social impact that it's going to have, and all those kind of things. So if, you get like a collective of people starting to think like that, I think, we are in a better position to kind of address some of the issues. And I think that's the skill that everyone needs to have in their tool. So they need to be able to push back, right? I know it's very difficult because sometimes there's like this cultural nuances where, like, if you look at South Africa, sometimes like older people you kind of like have to respect. So automatically, because this guy's like older than you, just like scared when he comes and asks you to do something, like, but it's wrong. Like, you shouldn't be doing it. It's
part of the culture. Yeah, you have to keep quiet and listen to your elders or people senior to you. But yeah, you're right. What if it's wrong, the things that they're telling you to do?
I mean, that's kind of like what's going on in my head. I know it's like super unstructured, but I think it's super fun as well.
It's fine. It's a important thing because, we've got all these young people in tech, and we've got all these older people running, these businesses and these corporates with a different mindset. So how do these young people, who should be more conscious about what they're creating or helping to create, how do they confront that issue of, let's change the way we do things?
I think that's why I'm saying, like, you can't fix one part of the process and not fix the other part of the process. Like, if you're saying that designers should push back, or like anyone in any position should push back on things that they think are not okay, then you also need to kind of create an environment where it's okay to push back, right?
But nobody's going to give you that, right, Caleb? I don't think anybody's going to give you that. I think people are also, because the environment is not like that, they're scared to make that change. But I think that we need to advocate for it. We need to advocate for businesses. We need to say,
I think just creating a culture where it's comfortable to challenge, right? People are comfortable with being. I know it's really difficult.
I don't think there's ever a culture where it's okay to challenge. And people hate it. People hate it. I mean, especially in corporates that are very structured, they're rigid. They have all these hierarchies. They don't want to be challenged. They want to have their say over other people.
There's also a world where we could just burn them all down and build a new.
I mean, if you all your startups, really thrive, then all these corporates are going to get replaced anyway.
That's if they also don't change into the same kind of.
It's very hard. It's very hard for big, slow companies to become agile and to move. You can see they're automating everything. They're replacing all their workers. That's the only way to, I think, reduce the scale that they've created for themselves. They are their own worst enemy right now.
That's also something interesting that I wanted to chat about, because someone asked me recently, where do you think it's the best place to start my career? And that was the most difficult question I've ever been asked, because so it's like, okay, if you don't have the answer, tell me how you did it. I was like, I worked for a tiny company. and then another tiny company. Then I went and worked for a big company. Then I went back to work for another smaller company again. It was just like this the roller coaster. And he asked me why, and I'm like, this is like certain boxes that you need to tick because that's how things work, and you just kind of like become a grown up about it. Having this on your CV is really good. But if you went to a small company and you didn't have that in your CV, then you wouldn't be that guy. So you kind of like go there and then you go back to the small company again that you're working in, but now you this guy, right?
It's a very
And that
complicated strategy. Yeah.
it's a very complicated strategy because most people that work for very big companies end up working for small companies as something else from the pattern that I've noticed at least. So that's a very interesting one as well. Like how do we position how do we if someone were to ask you right now to give them advice on something like that, what would you say?
So it's exactly what you mentioned in the beginning for me, right? It's about, previously we had this idea of, working towards a career, a title, all these accolades, but now it's should be about the problems you want to solve and what tools do you need to pick up along the way and where can you learn that to better help you to solve those problems. So whether it's in a big company for a little while or a small company for a little while, you can pick up different skills in different places, but they all have to be aligned to some problem that that's your purpose that you want to solve with your life.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? My final answer was when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself what you're about to do and if it's drawing you close to what you wanted to achieve in the beginning.
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, then great. If the answer is no, is this an interim period where you have to do something in order to be able to move? If the answer is no again, then maybe you shouldn't be doing
it. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean,
yeah, I think that's the only way that I can kind of think about it. And
yeah. And I think, when people start to do that, when they start to align with their purpose and what they want to solve, then they can become more conscious about the work that they're doing, and be those gatekeepers and say, no, this is wrong, and stand up for what is right. Because if, that's meaningful work for you, you would do that. But if you're just doing it for, the accolades and the titles, you don't care, what goes past your desk.
Yeah, it's yeah, if I don't know if it's not a lot maybe sometimes a lot like the corruption in the country, kind of try to join politics to change them from the inside, and you go oh, what?
You become corrupt. It's like a disease.
Like a disease, you can't, can't.
So I mean, also, you join a big company and then you get sucked into their culture instead of you being able to change anything. You also have to be wary of that, I guess.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The other thing that I found really interesting that I think I wanted to chat to you about is this notion of people looking for work overseas. And I understand it's got a travel element to it. It's got I want to experience a different country, which I am totally for, and I think it's great to have different experiences. I'm worried about though, if it's not some sort of uh, a cultural maybe thing that's going on that might have completely gone wrong. And by that I mean where you feel, I feel like there might be a bit of an inferiority complex in the African people, or in the South African people, to be more specific, where I am, where it feels like if I went and worked for Facebook or a company like that, I mean, it looks great on your CV. That's the statement that I keep hearing, right? And I don't know if, that's what drives me in the morning, for stuff to
your
kind
CV.
Yeah, my CV. I don't. You know what I mean? And there's just this notion of, if it's there, it's better, right? Where I feel there's a lot of opportunities being missed, where people could do great things in the continent and in the country, to be more specific. Around, you probably would be the first person to do a specific thing in a country like this as compared to somewhere else. I don't, except for the designers that I work with, I don't know any other designer in the country who literally does what I do. Like,
Yeah.
I'm the only person, right? So you kind of don't have that, and I think we've got like very interesting challenges to solve, and I don't know where this notion is coming from, right? And I think it's a very interesting one to kind of like pick your brain about, kind of.
Yeah. So I think, even when we were growing up, a lot of, for our parents and our communities, a sign of success was if you got some engineering or medical degree and you ended up going overseas, So we still have this idea that things are better overseas and that's a sign of success, so like pretty much leave and go and take your skills with you. But, for me personally, I had to work overseas because I couldn't find the kind of work that I needed to do here. There wasn't a lot of opportunity because it's in innovation. But also I had to bring that back here, to do what I need to do now. So there's some value, I guess, in working with other companies overseas and learning from them, but I don't think that's a permanent solution. And for me, it wasn't really about my CV. I don't think that is a fulfilling thing. I mean, you're having all these titles and companies, these huge corporates on your CV. It might look great and might be great for LinkedIn, but at the end of the day, is that adding to your purpose? Is that if it's adding value to what you're trying to solve, that's great. But at the end of the day, you need to do something useful with that.
There's also this, I think, in the point that I made earlier around observing and just like looking at things by just like looking at how people behave, there's a lot of variables that kind of end up influencing people's behavior, and some of it happens at a at a large scale, where like it's a kind of like happening at like the whim of that specific like collective or the culture or those people, and no one is really aware of it, right? I always give the example of like a computer and a tree. I think to my kid are the same thing. Like he will need to grow up and I have to show him that this is man-made, this is not. he wouldn't know, right? And I think like when you don't know, you don't know. And sometimes it's a little too late to know. So this idea of things that you want to do with your life, and where that comes from, right? I really like, and I keep saying this point in a lot of like conversations, that I really feel like depending on like where you come from, in some instances, what you want to do with your life is determined by what is the most effective tool for eradicating poverty or for giving you like a specific kind of like social status, which I think is a very, very dangerous thing, right? Just because for instance, I wanted to be an animator because I thought like that was really cool, and I like cartoons. It was not something that I was really passionate about. It's just like really cool. And when I started doing it, I realized that this is cool and I'm learning a lot, but I don't imagine myself waking up every day and sitting at this desk and drawing frame after frame. Like it would drive me crazy. It would drive me crazy, right? And that was a bit of my kind of time wasted. Not really, because I learned a lot. I still apply some of the learnings there, but I feel like I would have, spent my time much more purposefully if I kind of knew what I wanted to do. And so this idea, and I think it exists across a few cultures in South Africa, of I want to be a doctor. That is a very interesting, like everyone in my class wanted to be an engineer.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't know what that type of engineer would wake up in the morning and do. Right?
Yeah.
I think the idea of having a YouTube series with like a day in the life of would be great, just to see what someone does. Like, do they work outdoors, indoors? Like, what is the kind of work that they do? What do they have to, deal with? I think that would be like a very interesting thing to kind of, because I think there's this like, yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah, so we had the same situation, right? And it was never about what the job was about. It was always about the status of the job. Nobody even knew what a civil engineer or an electronic engineer actually did. But like, you were all striving for that, or to be a doctor. But like, you don't
Yeah,
know the day-to-day stuff.
It's always this, what is the most difficult thing that I can do in university? And you go this, and they go, I want that one.
Yeah.
Like that everyone else hasn't picked, right? Because it's so difficult. And I think a lot of things get lost in that process, right? Like there's a great deal of joy for you as an individual that going through your life, or as a young person, if you don't have to work really hard because you really love something, right? Or you're really good at it. I value and understand that some people need to go into these fields that are really difficult. But I think sometimes there's a great deal of joy when you're really talented at something and it aligns with what you want, and you just like kind of, you just like go for it, right?
Yeah.
You're the most effective, I really think that's great. So that is very interesting. That like it goes back to the question that I posed in the beginning, like what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, is this a branding exercise, or is this like, because you don't see yourself doing, you see yourself as being, right? So you're asking me what I want to be, not what I want to do, right? I think if we started asking people what they actually want to do, it would be very different from what they want to be, right?
Yeah.
And I think it might have something to do with, the division of labor and, the labeling of labor and valuing it. Like there's titles that just like really sound fancy, right?
Oh wait, like LinkedIn has all these weird titles. Some of them I know I have to like go in the dictionary to figure out what people are talking about, because they're made up. They just make up stuff now, because it's so important.
Yeah, I think just to kind of like touch on the younger audience as well, there's like really interesting experiences that I've had as an adult now that I think I wish I had someone tell me when I was younger, that there's no silver bullet for making money, right? There's no miracle that happens, and kind of, you just go into this course and you make a lot of money. I mean, I could argue that if you need to be there as a doctor to kind of treat people, if you're not there, you're really not making money. You're worse than a guy who's just like sitting and it's got a bunch of people making money for him. So I would argue that you'd never be rich. That should never be the point. The point that I'm trying to make is I have the deepest respect for people that do even other types of work that we need as a society, right? You can't all be just like engineers, plumbers. I had a guy who actually installed my cupboards, and I wanted to go away to give him time to do it. He did it in a whopping 18 minutes, and he was done. And he left, and he charged me an arm and a leg, and he's probably going to do that for the rest of the day. And he realized, like, this guy must be making a killing, right? So I think if someone finds something that is really, really valuable to them, and they become just like really good at it, like even if like there was no need for cupboards anymore, like in the world, and like there was like no business at all, the few people that are left looking for it would still call that guy. I think that's a really important thing to think about, right? To go, I love this, like I want to do it, and I'll, the money then comes after, like, because you kind of like just refine that specific skill and just become like really good at it. And by skill, I don't mean like one thing that you do. I just mean that those things that you need to kind of like solve that problem. So that problem that it's for him, it's like beautiful kitchens. He just want to make beautiful. That's his problem, right? And I really, really think that is important in tackling the issue around career choices for young people.
Yeah.
We just need to remove this branding exercise where
yeah.
Maybe that's why we have so many angry people at corporates.
Exactly.
Maybe that's why. I'm happy. I love opening my sketch and whatever. I just like doodling stuff. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I also left corporate, started my own thing, and I work long hours, but I love it. I love what I do. I couldn't say that when I was working in the office in my little cubicle, doing just following instructions from other people, because I didn't feel like it was meaningful. It wasn't actually, what the kind of problems I wanted to solve in the world.
And that goes back to the point that I said initially, that it should be driven by passion.
Yeah.
That's when you work the long hours. That's when you go on that path of continuous learning. You're not looking at the end to go like, oh, I'm gonna finish some work so I can get paid.
Yeah.
Like if the money becomes the motivator for you to work, I mean, it works for some other people, but I think the world that we're living in right now is just going to become a little more difficult, especially when it demands so much out of you, and you just have no interest for it, or any genuine interest for it at all.
Yeah. So it all comes back to what you're passionate about solving in the world, and everything else follows after that.
I think that's the theme. We figured it out.
Yeah, that's
I think
that's
the theme. Like,
yeah,
I think just find the thing that you're really passionate about, and I mean, you don't have to find it from day one.
Yeah,
how many people?
It's a journey. It's a journey.
How many people in second year wanted to change what they were studying?
Yeah, I mean,
after
I think everybody, I think when I was studying IT, there was like 2,000 people in first year university, and then like by second year, there was 200.
Yeah. But I think that there's a role that, and I think these are the kind of forums, and I really, really appreciate this. It's great thanks for having me. I think there needs to be, people need to be aware of like what is available to do, right? Because sometimes it's a matter of looking at what is available, going and doing that, and then you meet a guy and you ask him like, what do you do, or a girl, and they go like, I do this and this. And he's like, that is exactly what I'm looking for. I just didn't know what it was for.
Yeah. I think it just unfolds on your journey. You just have to be open. You just have to be adaptable when the opportunity does come for you to learn something new about yourself and what you want to do in the world. You've got to take it.
I'm interested in this idea of bridging gaps, right? Of having a lot of people have conversations. I haven't spoken to any design students, or I've spoken to people that are about to graduate. I haven't actually spoken to people that are really confused, that they don't know what they want to do with their lives, right?
How about we set up a workshop where you can talk to all the confused students and share all, your learnings with them? Because I mean, they're just as confused. People are asking, what are the skills that make you most marketable for the future? And they're forgetting, that they even have a purpose on this planet.
I think so. So that's what I'm really interested in, like having conversations that normally don't happen, because I feel as much as you can do research and do work day, take a girl child to work or something like that, like it's just not enough time for you to understand, what this means for you. And I mean, this is the rest of your life, right? This is you waking up in the morning and going and doing this. And I think the earlier we kind of like have the conversations of going, this is what you can do with your life, figure out that thing that, that means something to you. I think the earlier we have that conversation, the better. Or we're just going to end up with a branding exercise where I want to be this at this, right? At this company, right? I mean, the biggest ad campaign is companies like that we should how people pride themselves with working for specific corporations, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, I think it's an awesome thing. I'm just saying that you need to be really aware of like what you're saying when you kind of like go on that journey. And I really think that conversation is not happening enough. I've been looking around for platforms and things where people kind of give young people career advice. And by career advice, I think like you've already set the tone for a list of things that people like accounted. Like you just go alphabetically, right? That's not how I think about it. I think about it as in like it's a problem. It's a thing that you feel like you want to do. It's a change that you want to affect in the world, right?
Yeah. And this is the kind of
Yeah,
advice we need to be giving to young people, you know, in whether they're in school or out of school, or students, or even people wanting to change their careers. This is what they need to hear. And these are the conversations that are not happening enough.
yeah. So, like, if I use a case study of someone that I chatted to recently, and I asked them, like, why did you go and study medicine? Why do you want to become a doctor? And they said because they're worried about people's health. And I'm like, tell me more, elaborate a little bit. And they went, I just don't like people getting sick and then dying. Okay, if you don't like people getting sick, you should intervene before they come to the hospital. So doctors exist in a hospital where the problem is. You needed to take a step back and make sure that people live healthier lives. If people are living healthier lives, do you see that there will be
Yeah,
no need for
preventative medicine. Yeah.
so the problem that they were looking at was preventing people from getting sick. But the solution that they came up with was, let me go and wait for them until
Yeah.
they get sick and then help them, right? So like there's this disparity. Like if you had crystallized that and like spoke to someone like me and asked me like, oh, I'm really interested in like maybe you should have started a gym. Maybe you should have been a dietitian. I don't know. Like there's a couple of other ways that you could think about it, but you can clearly see that they're not in the phase of the problem where they're really passionate about. They're at the point where like things might end, and that will be very devastating for people that doesn't like a person that doesn't want to see that happening. So I think it would be very valuable to kind of like have those kind of conversations. I think the approach that we have to design is very interesting and could work in a lot of things in life in general. Think about how when people come to you and say, "We want to build an app," you always go,
Oh,
"No, tell me
I
what the
love that.
problem
I love
is."
that question. You're like, how can we build an app for this? Like, why do you
Like,
need an app?
why do you want to build an app? So I think it's also that, right? Maybe we need to kind of like reach out to young people and go, so you want to be an accountant? Why do you want to be an
Yeah,
accountant? Right? Like,
because
because I
my
want
dad
lots
is
of
an
money.
accountant, or my mom is an accountant. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of need that. Yeah, because I think continuous learning will always require that passion, right? That undying devotion for
Yeah.
that specific subject to go like I really, you know I don't need any sort of motivation for me to go and read books on technology. I just kind of like
Yeah,
keep
you
finding.
would, if you would, you want to solve this problem and you're passionate about it, you will find any kind of information from wherever the source is, and you will, use that to further your goal. But like, if you don't care about it, you'll just be like avoiding this all day.
I really think if you look at how, I never know how to pronounce that name, Kutsun something on YouTube. I think you also have a video of it on the website. They
Yeah.
have like these very quirky and clever animation videos
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they
yeah.
like explain. I
It's
think they
German,
made like a
German,
COVID
yeah.
one. Yeah, it's German, right? And like designers eat those up, right? Star Wars, like we just like love science, right? It takes so much, like we're all the same, like
Yeah, Geek
and
Squad.
and I find that really interesting. Like if I were a farmer, I think one like if I were like right now, I would go home and go read a book about technology. Like just like you would never remove that passion, right? So it's a good thing now that I read like that book about technology, but it still benefits me in my career because that's the thing that I'm interested in. I have to actually make an effort now to go out and look for other information. Like, oh, I'm going to work in this industry now. Let me go look at like how automotive works or how this works, and that becomes like very fresh and interesting. But like for the core that I do, I don't even really need to work hard to wake up in the morning and go like,
Yeah.
yeah, I have to keep up with what's going on with Elon Musk right now. Oh my god. No, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, there's so much more we can talk about. There's so much I think we can collaborate on and, share and in these conversations and have more conversations with other people, especially the younger kids. And, we'd love to have you back or set up something around that. But thank you so much for your time, Caleb. It was really, really interesting chatting to you.
Great.